everybody looks so happy.
Right,
How
yes.
was the train?
Well, it was quite a journey.
Yes, long,
Hello, Doc. We're in God's country. We're glad to be home.
After 30 straight hours of traveling,
Nice to be home. I bet it was a great trip. It was a wonderful trip.
and 3 weeks in China,
Everybody should go there.
the Windsor Community Concert Band arrived home in Windsor in the early morning hours of August the 21st, 1992. Exhausted and glad to be back on familiar ground.
That's for doing it, eh? All the way. There and back.
It was a trip that took them halfway around the world, to China. It started in the early morning hours of July 31st with a long bus ride to Toronto. And then a day-long plane ride to Shanghai, and finally China's capital, Beijing.
Here we are in the airport. And head sleeping it off.
Look at this muscles. She never seen such muscles.
37 band members, 2 members of the Windsor Symphony, 5 musicians from the United States, 3 roadies, 2 spouses, 52 crates of musical equipment, and all this luggage set out to tour China. This is the inside story. Hi, welcome to the Inside Story. I'm Dale Molnar, and this is our first program. In the coming weeks and months, we'll be bringing you stories on people in the Windsor and Chatham areas. But on today's program, we'll bring you part 1 of the Windsor Community Concert Band's trip to China in 1992. Ever have to write one of those stories in school about what you did on your summer vacation? Well, since I'm in the band, that's what I did on my summer vacation of 1992.
The first day we were in Beijing, we had the night free to ourselves at our hotel room, and I remember they had a bowling alley, a shopping mall, and a pool hall in the hotel. And so the first night we traveled halfway across the world, we spent bowling.
The band's first day in China was a rainy one.
But people ride bicycles, which that really hit me. As soon as we walked out on the street the first day in Beijing, I mean, you could get run over by 30,000 bicycles in about a minute.
A trip to the Forbidden City, the home of China's emperors from 1368 to 1911, had to be put off. But the first of many shopping excursions to China's foreign exchange department stores, called friendship stores, began.
I got my little rug.
There's little one-by-one rugs just to see. I'm still learning how to work this.
Good morning again, everyone.
In Beijing, we meet Mr. Chu, our interpreter throughout the trip. On day 2, we're off to the Great Wall, the big highlight of the trip, one of the 7 wonders of the world, the only man-made structure in the world that can be seen from the moon.
We can't see a thing.
on a clear day. We were there on a foggy day.
Here we are. We made that great wall. Great wall. Great wall.
I sweat my brains out. We went up to the fourth one, and it's like, oh man, the stairs are like this, basically. Almost a perfect incline.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
You can't see anything because it's so dark. I mean, because of all the clouds, it just gets thicker and thicker the higher you go. Can you imagine fighting on this wall? Having to run up there. They're taking the fifth wall. I'm on the first.
Well, this is a great day. What a photo opportunity this day is, eh?
Well, if I wasn't such an idiot and hadn't loaded or forgot to load film in my camera, I'd be a real happy camper right now.
I came all the way here to look at a wall. You know something? They don't make walls like they used to.
Doesn't this look like a failed Geraldo mission or something? You know? It's right up there with the cracking open the safe bit, you know?
Hey, Dad, who speaks English here?
A little.
You speak English? What do you think of the wall?
A little. $3 for this?
Get right beside the camel.
John, get up on the camel. Let's go. No, I don't want it. $2. Members of the band's Challenge Cup team decided to pose with the camel. Every Challenge Cup team needed to have a picture of themselves with an animal and the Windsor flag. Things turned out a little differently than planned.
He's showing us his best side. You want 2 won? 10 won. Okay. There you go. Thanks. My hat now. It's my hat.
That day, we also visited the Dingling Ming tombs, where the emperor and empress from the Ming dynasty were buried. The burial chambers were fairly empty. All the treasures buried with the emperor and empresses were above ground and on display, like these headdresses and shoes for an empress with bound feet.
Did you put tattoos at that last table there?
It's about 20 fingers. In that period, but after Cynthia won, took the ring.
I got
In the places that we played, the auditoriums, the halls were fabulous. The one that we were in Beijing was designed, I guess, by an American, and the acoustics were fabulous. And the very last one we played in, the one in Shanghai, you know, you could rotate the stage, you could rotate all the things up on the stage to make the acoustics the very best they could be.
After our first performance in Beijing, we exchanged music with People's Liberation Army, which sponsored the performances.
著名乐器，多数是我们团的，都是我们团作曲家自己写的。
So to express our sincere thanks for the Windsor Band, we want to present you some music book and sheet, because many they are created and composed by our own band, the composers of our own band, the typical Chinese music with the Chinese characteristics. So we want to give it to you.
可以那个看登场说的这个时间太短了，太长一点我这个就更加过瘾了就。
He said if you play some longer time, people will enjoy more. Thank you. 啊，谢谢谢谢谢谢谢谢谢谢谢啊啊。
The Chinese are pretty friendly people, and they sure know how to put on a spread. This is what pretty well every lunch and dinner look like.
We could have cold spaghetti for breakfast. So that was a little bit different. Some of us tried it. Actually, it wasn't too bad. But it was just something you wouldn't expect to eat for breakfast.
Anything pretty exotic?
My husband nicknamed them Tweety birds on a stick. We think they were sparrows. We're not sure, but little tiny birds. And they looked like they'd been barbecued, Dale. They were, I don't know, they're just rather unusual looking anyway. And it was pretty hard. I wasn't able to try them. I couldn't quite do that. And the 100-year-old eggs, too, I think a few people tried those. I wasn't one of them, but they look like dark, hard-boiled eggs.
Here, have some.
Don't ask me what this stuff was, though. It tasted pretty good, whatever it was. Yes, this is where we dined for 6 days. But after 3 weeks of this, we could hardly wait for Canadian food. Luckily, we didn't have to go too far. The McDonald's at Beijing's Tiananmen Square is the largest in the world.
Hi, yes, we're at McDonald's.
There's no drive-through.
Yeah, wherever you go, McDonald's is there. I don't know.
Billions served every day.
Yes.
They greet you at the door here, and there's plenty of service.
Large steak. Oh, you don't have that.
Just point on here. Just point to the thing, I think.
Yeah, 2 Big Macs, a large fry, a Coke, a chocolate milkshake, something I've been dying for, and a small fry. We're now going to eat in Beijing at McDonald's.
All right, go to your table.
Of course, this place is a little pricey for the average Chinese. This is where they eat. This is where they buy their food. This is where they live. And this is where they sometimes go to the bathroom. The bicycles they drive seem to have endless capacities. And no matter where you go, there are people everywhere. the center of all activity. In the midst of all that hustle and bustle, there are ancient peaceful temples dating back to the time of the philosopher Confucius. A place to go for tourists to admire and gape in wonder, as well as a place for Buddhists to worship.
I wonder what this is made of.
This is the Yonghe Gong ticket, and I just got taken for 10-1 here.
In the above-mentioned halls, there are numerous Buddhist statues so artistically and beautifully sculptured that they seem to be alive. Oh, just what I need after heat stroke.
This is the Lama Temple, constructed in 1694. It's the largest lamasery in the city. It was once an official residence for an emperor. Next, we visit a Confucian temple.
Nearly 700 years old, the tree is still sturdy and sturdy.
A 700-year-old tree.
We are very happy to be here to meet our Canadian friends. And it's our great honor to be here to receive those music scores given by the Canadian Windsor Community Concert Band.
The day after our first performance in Beijing, the teachers in the band assembled for a music exchange between our band and officials from the Chinese Ministry of Culture. A domestic music publishing company gave us several scores representing a variety of Western music to give to the Chinese music educators. On hand were the Vice Director of Arts Education, who oversees the operation of 31 arts universities and 80 middle schools across China, as well as the Vice President of the Central Conservatory of China, China's leading school of music.
这个呢是我们学校的青年交响乐团的录制的唱片和磁带。
And there are some cassettes from the students' symphony orchestra called Central China Youth Symphony Orchestra. They made some tapes.
再一次向大家表示感谢。
Thank you again.
I can't help but feel that all of us, when we first arrived in China, we felt like strangers, but with each passing day, we feel that we're at home.
刚到中国呢，我们觉得我们都是陌生人，但是这一天天的过去以后呢，我们觉得我们都是老朋友了。
I think one reason for that feeling is the fact that we are here because of music, and music is an international language that all people understand.
It may be an international language, but even we weren't able to say musically whatever we wanted. China still controls what kind of music the people get to hear, and they frown upon hard rock and roll. They weren't ready to accept the notion of freedom of expression.
We'd like to share our feelings that we recognize that there is both good music and bad music.
我想呢，大家也跟我们可能有同样的想法，就是音乐里头呢有好的音乐，也有不好的音乐。
But the quality of the music isn't decided whether it is classical or pop.
Sorry, I can't.
You can't say that.
Sorry.
I would like to mention that we feel that music in all forms, if done tastefully, can be pleasantly received.
但是呢，如果我们都是就是发自内心的来演出我们的这个音乐呢，它肯定是能够受到大家欢迎的。
And we recognize that music, no matter what its form, represents artistic abilities, and that's what makes life interesting.
音乐呢，能够表现咱们人生的这个。
After all the politically correct words, Jorenda promised to send more music and supplies to the Chinese when we got home. Two performances in Beijing. The day after the first performance, and 5 days into the trip, it's time to make the long-anticipated visit to Tiananmen Square in the Forbidden City.
This is it, man. We're here.
History.
This is it. This is the place.
Historic place.
Center of Beijing. This is where it all happened.
Right here. As we spin around Mike, he'll stand in one spot. We can see exactly where Mike is.
Chairman
all the
Mao,
sights all around him.
Chairman Mao, great hall of people.
Tiananmen Square covers 440,000 square meters, and it's capable of accommodating 1 million people.
We found out that it was equal to something like 60 Canadian football fields. So, and when you stand in the middle of it, it's overwhelming, you know, and just turn around and look. It really is huge. The buildings impressed me on all sides. Like, that was very impressive. You know.
It was a little frightening, actually, when we first got there. We started pulling out cameras and stuff. You know, for a split second there, you weren't sure what they were going to do, because no matter where you go in China, if you're Caucasian, they're going to stare at you. So that took a bit to get used to, too, and they looked a little more threatening, I remember, when we pulled up in Tiananmen Square. So it was a bit hectic for the first about hour, I guess, we were there. But once we got used to it and got used to being there, it was quite a sight. It was amazing how large the place was.
Of course, no one can visit Tiananmen Square without remembering the massacre of student demonstrators on June 3rd of 1989.
Yeah, I remember standing on the street where you see the pictures in the news from what happened in Tiananmen Square, and you see we were standing on the street where the tanks rolled down.
That's on Shangan Avenue, the street where the People's Liberation Army troops shot most of the students, which is just outside of Tiananmen Square. John and I took a pedicab ride down to the Beijing Hotel on that avenue. We didn't know it at the time, but we went right past one of the spots where most of the students were shot.
It was quite an experience to be there.
Ironically, Tiananmen means Gate of Heavenly Peace. This is the Tiananmen Gate to the Forbidden City, with a picture of Chairman Mao Zedong over the entrance. It faces south toward the monument to the people's heroes and the memorial to Chairman Mao himself. His body lies there. We didn't go in. The lineups were too long. On the east side of Tiananmen Square, the Museum of Chinese History and the Museum of Chinese Revolution. On the west side, the Great Hall of the People, where the government sits. From there, we entered the Forbidden City, featured in the movie The Last Emperor.
I want to go home.
Yeah, that's the hall of supreme harmony. That's the main hall for the emperor to conduct the daily affairs.
Oh, okay. So this is the Imperial Palace?
Yeah.
If you visited only one room per day in the Forbidden City, it would take you 40 years to see the whole thing. 14,610 rooms.
And I could believe it. I don't know how many rooms we saw, but it wasn't nearly the number that we could have seen. It took us in the heat, and we were moving fairly quickly because it was so hot. It took us somewhere in the neighborhood of about 3.5 hours to get through the Forbidden City.
It was the hottest, most humid day that we were there, and it was just monstrous. It's bigger than you could have ever imagined.
From Beijing, the band followed the footsteps of the last emperor, Pu Yi, to Changchun, the city where he lived as the puppet emperor under the Japanese during World War II.
I remember landing at the airport, and they've got what looked like fighter jets under covers on the side, just on the side runway, and they've got cows kind of roaming in around the planes. You know, you wonder if you're gonna hit one on the way down, and it was an amazing sight. They don't fly them as straight as they do over here, too. They took a couple sharp turns that, you know, made us start praying for our life. But I remember, too, when we took off, I guess the landing strip that we were on, or the takeoff strip, went right through a street in the town. And I remember they had, like, what looked like barriers for when a train crosses. These barriers come down, and all the village people just kind of stop, and, you know, the lights are flashing, and the plane takes off, and after the plane takes off, they go back up, and the people cross over again. It was hard to believe, you know. And
Changchun is China's automotive capital and Windsor's twin city. On tomorrow's show, we continue the tour in Changchun in 4 other cities: Dalian, Nanjing, Hangzhou, and Shanghai. Tune in tomorrow at noon for part 2 of the China trip.